we are going to go to the second session of our second part of our program here. We've been talking, kind of dipping in on kind of a high level, low level stories about individual concepts. And now we're really going to get into one story. And we've got a wonderful person to do that for us, Sabrina, who has been the founder of Kidogo in Kenya. Amazing story of providing entrepreneurs the opportunity for daycare for children. And Sabrina, I want you to introduce yourself, tell us your story, why are you here? And we want to learn more about what you're doing.
Thanks for having me, and congratulations all on the launch of this paper. It's great to see franchising in the spotlight, and it's a cool period of time for this sector. As Peter mentioned, my name is Sabrina Habib. I'm the co-founder and Chief Exploration Officer of Kidogo. I'm based here in Nairobi, Kenya, and many of you, I think, joined the IFA UNH franchising virtual conference in October. And so you probably heard me speak already about Kidogo and our model and what we do and why we do it. And so I don't want to bore you with the same presentation, but I thought I could give you a little bit of a refresher on who Kidogo is and why we exist, and then tell you a little bit about what's changed since October, what we've learned, and the challenges that we continue to face. So as a reminder, Kidogo is a nonprofit social enterprise, and we improve access to high quality, affordable early childhood care and education for families living in poverty. We are currently the largest childcare network in Kenya, and we've got ambitions to scale across East Africa over the coming years. We exist because of women and mothers like Agnes, who face a very difficult decision every single day of where to leave their young children when they go to work for the day. There is no childcare, publicly funded childcare system in Kenya, nor anywhere on this continent. And so moms have to make this decision of, do I go out and hustle to wash clothes door to door or sell fruits and vegetables so that I can earn a living and put food on the table? Or do I stay at home to look after my young child before they're ready to go to school? We exist because of girls like Faith. Faith is an adolescent sibling and represents the hundreds of thousands of older girls between 9 to 13 years of age who are often pulled out of school to look after the younger sibling. And in most cases, they never actually return back to school. We exist because of women like Helen, who either from a calling from God to look after young children or seeing an opportunity to earn an extra buck, or probably a combination of both, decides to open up her own childcare center. It's unregulated, it's unlicensed, it's operating in the shadows. And she does this from 5 to 6 in the morning until 7 or 8 p.m. She looks after upwards of 22 infants and toddlers by herself for 5 to 6 days of the week. And she does this tirelessly day in and day out with very little pay, with very little recognition and very little respect. Childcare is seen as something that anyone can do. Early childhood development is one of the only certifications you can get in Kenya if you didn't finish high school, which shows the lack of importance placed on this field. And yet we know these women are superheroes in the work that they do. And we ultimately exist because of kids like this. These kids represent the millions of young children who grow up in these informal daycare centers while their moms are going to work. They're spending 10 to 12 hours of their day, 5 to 6 days of the week for their first 3 years of life in a situation that looks like this. It's a 10-foot by 10-foot corrugated metal shack. There is very little hygiene, very little stimulation, poor nutrition. Half these kids are stunted, which means they're too short for their age, which is a cause of chronic malnutrition. And because 90% of brain development happens before the age of 5, you can almost tell the trajectory of this child's life. They're going to go on to formal schooling at the age of 4 or 5. They're going to have cognitive deficits, socio-emotional delays, language deficiencies, and they'll never fully be able to reach their full potential. They may or may not continue school. They might drop out after primary school. They'll engage in menial labor jobs, and they'll continue this intergenerational cycle of poverty. And I think what is so tough is I came across this situation almost 10 years ago and learned that this was the best childcare option for working moms, that moms are paying for this about $1 per day, or about 20% of household income, because they've got nothing better. They've got no better solution here. And yet there are 3,500 such daycares within Nairobi's informal settlements alone. When I came across this exact daycare 10 years ago, I called my now husband and told him what I saw, talked about the injustice of the situation. I think it felt particularly close because my parents are from East Africa. I'm a first-generation Canadian, but my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents all grew up in the region, and realized that the same way these kids' stories have been written for them, that could have been my trajectory as well. And so when we looked at the situation and understood it a little bit better, franchising right away felt like the best solution, the promise of franchising. We didn't know much about franchising, but we knew a lot about McDonald's. And I know that when I'm craving chicken McNuggets, if I go to one McDonald's or another, it's going to be the same. And I think childcare is really about trust. It's about consistency. It's about reliability. And so could we create that type of national childcare brand that parents could see a Kidogo logo and trust it and know that they would get a great experience? That was our vision. And so we started naively. We were in our mid-20s. We walked around the informal settlements of Nairobi and talked to hundreds of mothers and childcare operators, and we're trying to sell them on this vision of a united network of branded childcare centers, and they said no. And I think the two biggest things that came up there was, one, there's nothing wrong with my center. There's nothing wrong with the quality. This is fine. And meanwhile, Afzal and I were glancing at each other, and we see an open cook stove where there's children who are nearby and could get injured. There's no stimulation. It smells awful. The sanitation's bad. The kids are lying there. And yet they didn't see anything wrong with their center. And the second feedback we got was children don't start learning until the age of 3 or until they enter formal schooling. And so as long as I'm a mother and I drop my child off, and when I pick them up, they're in the same situation as when I drop them off, we're all good. They'll start learning when they enter school. And so we took that insight, we took those reflections, we went back to the drawing board, and in 2014, we quit our jobs, moved to Nairobi full-time, and launched Kidogo. And we started with a hub and spoke model. We figured if people don't know what's wrong with their centers, they don't know they can expect anything bigger because they've never seen anything better. You don't know what is possible if you've never experienced it before. So we had to stop telling people what we were thinking and needed to show them. And so we launched 2 Kidogo-owned corporate early childhood centers that kind of showed best practice of what quality childcare could look like. It used the same materials as what other daycares were using. It employed staff from the local community. No one lived more than a 10-minute walk away. The inside of centers were all using locally available materials, so none of this imported Fisher-Price type of stuff, and really to give this sense of here's what's possible. And years down the road, when we brought informal childcare operators to these spaces, their minds were blown. And we saw them take examples and then start doing them in their own centers. And that's exactly what we needed. And from there, we launched our social franchising program. And this is how it works. So it's a 3-step process. 1, we go into a community, we map it of all of the existing daycares. We use primarily a conversion-based franchising model, but in some instances, we'll actually work with a woman and help her start a center from scratch. We invite them to be part of the Kidogo program. It's kind of a precursor to the franchise because we can't trust the quality of any of the centers just yet. We need to spend time training and enhancing their quality. So we do this through a training and mentorship quality improvement program where we offer training, coaching from a franchising officer, and support tools to uplift both the quality of the center as well as the profitability through our entrepreneurship, business administration types of skills. This was previously a 9-month program. We reduced it to 6 months, and this year we're trying a 3-month version of it. At the end of the 3 months, those centers that reach our quality standards, which are based on a red, yellow, green, so those that achieve green are invited to become a franchisee. They receive a small renovation for their center, things like a skylight to make sure there's natural lighting coming in. We often put in an extra window to make sure there's good ventilation. We'll put in a barrier between the cooking area and the play area to ensure that there's no injuries or burns, which are very common in these types of centers. And then we paint it and brand it with the Kidogo logo as a way to signal to the community that this is a childcare center that you can trust. After that, they receive light touch, ongoing training, mentorship, and support tools, including our Mamapreneur app, to continue to keep their quality high. We ensure that all of our centers are profitable and they pay us a monthly nominal franchisee fee. The reason why we exist is, again, for children, making sure they get the best start to life. And it's been really great to watch the impact that we've been able to have on our kids. Kidogo kids outperform non-Kidogo kids in all areas of development. Malnutrition rates have gone down considerably. Our parents are our best ambassadors. We've got a Net Promoter Score of 84, which is really exceptional. And when we follow our kids later on in life, when they enter primary school, they're in the top 5% of their class. And so we've got confidence that these are the kids that will eventually become our next entrepreneurs, our next politicians, our next musicians, and really shape the Kenyan society. This workshop is called The Promise of Social Franchising. And I don't think there's a slide that can describe that better than this one. We operated our own centers, our own units for quite some time. And it was when we leaned into franchising as an approach, we scaled like crazy. We propelled. We have been doubling our size every year since 2018. And we are on track to continue to double until we reach our goal of 100,000 Kidogo kids by 2025. I think what's interesting is our plan was to have 390 mamapreneurs by the end of this year. We are currently at a network of nearly 500 mamapreneurs as of right now. And so we've done what we planned to do the whole year, we've done in this quarter, and we've taken what we've done in 7 years and doubled it in the last 10 weeks. And I don't know if the camera picks up the white hairs, but there's a lot of white hairs that have grown over the last 10 weeks because it's been a crazy period of time. But I think there's a few things that have led to this success that I'd love to share with you. So I think the first thing we learned is that complexity is the enemy to scale. When your model is very complex, when your approach has too many components, it's very difficult to scale. And so when we were thinking about our ambitions for this year, we had to rethink what did we need to keep close and what did we need to tweak about our model to make that work. And there was two big things we did. One was we cut the program from 6 months to 3 months. So rather than a monthly Saturday training once a month for 6 months, we now do an upfront 3-day training and we supplement it with mentorship for 3 months thereafter. It's a lot less resource intensive, both in terms of finances and HR, and has worked really well over the last little while. The second big change we made was that we simplified our materials so that it was easier to deliver. And in doing that, rather than training 2 communities at a time, which is what we've been doing for many years, in January, we trained 9 communities or 9 cohorts simultaneously. And over the period of last week and this week, we've trained 14 cohorts at the same time. So we've completely made our systems as efficient as possible, made our materials as easy to deliver as possible so that we can do it at a factory-like type of scale. I think the second thing that we've changed up is how we structure our systems. So we rejigged our org structure to ensure that there was a team specifically in charge of training and mentorship. And there's a team specifically in charge of facilities, so to do the renovations once a center becomes a franchisee. And there's another team that's completely in charge of health and nutrition. So each one of our program inputs, we've got a specialized team that is now taking care of it. And that has made things so much more efficient. Our facilities, it used to take 2 weeks to convert and renovate a center, it now takes less than a day because they've gotten so good at it. They do it just like that. And so I think, again, focusing on specialties and organizing your org structure based on that. The second piece that was hugely successful, which is completely underrated and probably sounds like common sense, is making sure that the team is bought into the targets that you set. So we're not very good at that in the startup world. Generally, as founders, we've got our vision of what we want to accomplish that year, and we tell the team and expect them to do it. And last year, we flipped the script, and I started our strategic planning session talking about our history to date and the scale of the problem, the size of the market, and putting a bit of a burning platform under the team to talk about how we can't play small anymore. Every year we're not scaling. There are millions of children whose potential is being lost. And starting with that premise, the team was able to set targets that were more ambitious than I've ever seen before. And they owned it from the beginning. And they were able then to trickle that down to their own teams, all the way down to our franchising officers who now have targets that are set. And I think it's been one of our best ways of exceeding our targets this year because there's complete buy-in and ownership. I think it's building the capacity of teams. We're a team of 75 people, all Kenyan, average age 28 years old at Kidogo. And so building the capacity of the team to set targets, to monitor their targets, to celebrate wins, to reflect on failures, has in itself become a core tenet to how we work and how we will scale. Hash talked a lot about this idea of stepwise growth. When we started Kidogo, one of the best pieces of advice we received was from Jordan Caslow, the founder of Vision Spring, an incredible organization that's been working for decades. And he talked about the need to get, and I think it's super useful for the franchising world, the need to get one unit right. Figure out what this looks like at one unit. And then once you've done one unit, figure out what it looks like at 5 units. And from 5 to 20 to 50 to 100. And I think there's such a balance there because there's this need to make sure you've got things right, but also this urgency to get a bit bigger. I think we see a lot of organizations wanting to scale and scale before things are ready. And so how do you make sure you've got things in a packaged way that works, that is ready for replication? But at the same time, how do you make sure you're not spending too much time perfecting something? Because the challenges you'll have with 20 franchisees is very different from the challenge you'll have with one. And 20 will be very different from the systems and processes you need when you've got 100 mamapreneurs, for example. And so this tension between how do you make sure you're scaling in the stepwise way, but also not staying too long in any area. And when I look at our trajectory and our history as Kidogo, we stayed small for too long. We stuck with 5 mamapreneurs for too many years before we took that next step. And it came from this desire of wanting to make sure it was perfect before we moved to the next step. And I think there is this tension again of making sure it's good enough before you get there, but also ensuring that you've got what it takes to move step to step. Begin with the franchisee. This is so core to everything that we do and is so critical. You can have the greatest operating systems, you can have airtight contracts, you can have SOPs coming out of who knows where, but you, at the end of the day, your thing will only work if it's got a great franchisee. And so start with who that person is. For us, it's who is this mamapreneur? Who is this woman? What are her dreams? What are her aspirations? What are her goals? What was her childhood like? You know, who is she as a person? We actually pivoted a lot of our program to start with a concept of confidence and self-esteem. Because if we want to implement systems that will help mamapreneurs follow up on parents' fees and collections, if she's not confident, she's not going to go and approach a parent about debt collection. So how do we build up her agency, her confidence to be able to see this as her micro business and believe in herself to be able to do this work? And it's been beautiful to see. You see mamapreneurs that come in initially and their body language is all slouched and they won't look at you in the eye. And through this process, you see them transform. And they are the ones who then will go off and have a second room or become a multi-unit franchisee because she believed she could. And it's been beautiful. And lastly, the power of community. I think we didn't figure this one out for a while. We thought it was about the tangible, it's the training, it's the manuals, it's the quality standards that are necessary for a franchisee, and those are all super important. But there is something intangible about the sense of belonging that comes from being part of a network. We now implement communities of practice. They happen every month in every community where mamapreneurs from that community get together. They meet at a specific daycare. They make play materials for that daycare, and then they just talk about their challenges and their successes and what's going on. And that has actually been the stickiest part of our model. It's why we haven't had a single franchisee leave of our 500, 100% retention rate. And I think part of it is coming from feeling like you belong to something. You're not going to risk wanting to leave that. I want to say that I think to be featured in a Stanford Social Innovations Review article is a pretty big deal, and we feel really grateful, and we feel grateful about our trajectory, but by no means are we perfect. We are struggling with things all the time, and we're still very much a work in progress. Here are a few challenges that we're facing, and there's tons more that I could tell you about. We're always trying to figure out how to add value to our franchisee. We don't operate in a market where the franchisee is reliant on our secret sauce or our recipe or our machine. The childcare ecosystem is very different. And so how do we continuously ensure the franchisee is receiving value so that she'll want to stay in the network? And what does that look like for a franchisee that's been with us for 1 year versus one that's been with us for 5 years? Their needs are a little bit different, and how do we ensure we're continuously meeting those needs while not affecting our cost per child or cost per franchisee? There is a trade-off between quality and profitability. The major expenses of a childcare center are rent and the salary of the caregiver. There is often a misalignment between our franchisees who want to take more and more and more kids because it means that she'll be more profitable, because at the end of the day, she's also living in an informal settlement and in poverty, versus our quality standards, which expect a certain caregiver to child ratio. And this ultimately comes down to, there is nowhere in the world where quality of childcare is offered for the bottom of the pyramid without some type of subsidy from a government. We are spending a lot of time advocating and lobbying for these types of changes and to have public funding, but we're decades away from that. And so in the interim, how do we ensure that the incentives of the franchisee, the financial incentives, are aligned with our quality expectations? Franchising officers play a critical role. They come from the community that they work in. There's a trust element that's built in when you see the same woman at church and in the market as you do when she comes to visit you. And we've trained our franchising officers to keep an arm's length distance from our franchisees. They're there to coach and mentor, but they can't be there as a best friend or as a sister. And over time, when you see someone once a week, once every 2 weeks, for years, you build that type of relationship, and those lines get blurred. And so we find franchising officers often have difficulty asking for the monthly franchisee fee when they know the backstory of what's happened in that woman's life that month. Maybe she got abused, maybe she's dealing with some things. The mamapreneurs have tough lives. Many of them are HIV positive. They're living in poverty. And so how do you ensure that you've got a great coaching relationship without it becoming too emotional and without disrupting the operations of the business? Husbands. I have a great husband. I'm very lucky. I've got one of the best ones. We often hear from mamapreneurs, though, that their husbands get in the way of their business. You've got a woman now who is empowered and is confident and assertive. And we have husbands complain that that's not the woman that they married, or that they're spending so much time working that they're not there to work and do the household responsibilities. We have an issue often when our best mamapreneurs who are ready to franchise are not able to because their husbands don't let them. This often happens with our home-based childcare centers, where husbands don't want their centers, their homes painted or have toys around because that's where they live. They don't want to feel like they're living in a childcare center. And so one of our biggest challenges and reflections is we need to involve husbands in the process as well of our franchising and figure out who are the other key stakeholders that we need to engage with. And this was touched on by Fiona and Greg, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but as social sector franchisees, we often are building the entire ecosystem from scratch. Unlike the US, where there is a system, there's things that work, there's regulations, and you're delivering a product or a service. In this case, we're doing everything. Again, parents, community members, policymakers don't believe that children start learning until the age of 3. And so we are simultaneously building demand for quality childcare, educating about the importance of these early years, as well as then delivering the quality centers through our network of franchisees. There's no regulations for what a caregiver to child ratio looks like, or what a certification for a mamapreneur needs to be. And so we are simultaneously creating the quality standards and enforcing them as well. And so I think there's a lot of complexity when you're trying to play multiple roles and work in parallel different environments. It's complex and it's sticky and it's yucky. But I think there's something to it, that if we can at the end of the day say that we built a childcare ecosystem, there's something cool about that. These were our challenges, and then COVID hit. And just briefly, I know we're running out of time. I think COVID changed the rules of the game. Centers have closed because they weren't able to pay rent. And so there's a lack of supply of childcare centers. Parents aren't able to afford fees anymore. So if they used to charge $1, they're now paying 50 cents per day. And our model was set up for owner operators. Many of those owner operator childcare centers went out of business from 9 months of closure last year. And so we are rethinking how we want to approach this and repackage our franchising model for new users and for this new game that we're in right now. But all to say that I think this work is complex, it's difficult, but it's incredibly rewarding, and we are very much on a path to continuing to learn to use the promise of social franchising to reach our goal, which is ultimately to ensure that all children, no matter where they're born, have the opportunity to reach their full potential. Thank you.
Sabrina, wow, that was so inspiring. What a beautiful story. You truly are unleashing the promise of social franchising. And it's just so exciting to hear the successes, the challenges, the impact that you're having. I think what you're representing, what all of us on this call are trying to support in whatever way that we do that. I know that we really are at the end of the hour. There's just a couple of questions we're going to try to get to. One of them is that somebody wants to take Kidogo to Latin America, and so I wonder if you're open for that. But a good question was that what does the economic model of Kidogo look like? Is there an upfront fee, a percentage based on royalty? So what's the financial arrangement that you have?
So there's kind of two components, the quality improvement program and then the franchisee part. The mamapreneur is paying $5 a month during that quality improvement program. And then during the franchise, it's $10 per month, represents about 10% of her earnings. We decided not to go with a royalty or a percentage because there would be a disincentive for mamapreneurs to report her financials. She would have 2 separate books and things like that. So we decided to do a flat rate fee.
Very good, very good. And just the last question we're going to ask, and it's kind of a 3-part question, that how do you make sure that the care providers are meeting your quality standards? I'm going to give you each one at a time.
Yeah, so we've got our franchising officers who go do their mentorship visits are also quickly doing a spot check on quality. And then we've got a separate quality assurance team that goes and does random checks to ensure that they're meeting the standards. It's again the red, yellow, green that we assess them on, and mamapreneurs have access to the quality standards, and we encourage them to do a monthly self-assessment as well.
And this sounds like a very American question, is how do you manage liability exposure to the child if it gets hurt at Kidogo?
It's so tough. Again, the lack of regulations, the lack of a market system that we work in. We have tried to approach every insurance agency in Kenya, and no one will cover 0 to 3-year-olds. Insurance starts from 4 years and above. So liability is one of our biggest risks that we know of, and something that we're trying to tackle of what happens. We have very strong parent and community engagement. So if something does happen at the center, and things have had in the past, we're able to work with the parent groups to be able to figure out how to resolve the issue on a case-by-case basis. And it hasn't to date impacted the brand, but we're very well aware that that is one of our biggest risks.
And the final question is that, how do you assure quality assurance over time and resist that temptation to increase volumes for revenue at the expense of quality?
$1 million question that that is one of our biggest tension, that quality and profitability gap. One of the things that we will be piloting this year is helping mamapreneurs through microloans expand to a second center. And so if she's got 15 kids and she's by herself, when she gets that 16th or 17th or 18th child, can we provide her a loan to be able to cover the rent and salary of an additional caregiver until she's able to work up her volumes to 28, 29, and 30 kids, where she'll then be able to actually earn more profit as a result of it. So that's one of the things in the pipeline that we're excited about.
Excellent, excellent. Well, again, what an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing this. It just inspires, I think, all of us to do more to get this social franchise, unleash the promise of the social franchising sector. This brings us to an end of this great program. I want to again thank the University of New Hampshire for hosting this and putting this all together, of course, represented by Hash. I want to thank Marla as the chairman of the International Social Sector Franchising Task Force, that's a mouthful, for guiding us and helping us put this together. Marla, we could not do this without your assistance and support. And again, I want to thank the audience for spending this time with us, learning what we're doing. This is a beginning. This is how we're going to get stronger. This is how we're going to get better, is by continually coming together, sharing experiences, learning from each other, and going forward to make sure that we are truly unleashing the promise of social franchising. So again, thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Fiona, Greg, Hash, amazing job. I appreciate all that you do in this incredibly important work. Have a great day, or night, or afternoon.
Thank you very much, Peter, Mala, Fiona, Sabrina, Greg, Andy, and Lynn for all making this happen, made it possible. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.